Robert and Carol, we're from Delaware County, Ohio, and we've been working on the elevator, which is back here at this part of the aft end of the horizontal stabilizers. So there's a left side and a right side, and they're different part numbers, different configuration. This part of the elevator, the lighter green parts, that came from the crash in Alaska, which we recovered in 2011. And so these lighter green parts are original, consisting of some ribs, a web plate right here, and the torque tube.
And then the first 3 ribs on the forward came from that.
So all of these parts here, the rest of it were fabricated. And this part up here, this is the trim tab. This is the first big part of the airplane that Carol and I built when we were back in Hangar 9. The elevator is sitting 90 degrees out of phase, so to speak. It's easier to align the top part of these trailing edge ribs if it's done vertically, and then of course it'll sit flat. So this is the leading edge of the elevator down here. So down through here would be that part, and then of course back up here would be the trailing edge.
You just put in the trim tab, isn't that right?
Yes, we installed the trim tab, and what the trim tab does, it's cable operated by a series of pulleys and bell cranks, and there's a spool right here, an aft spool which is behind the spar, and we have another spool down here ahead of the spar. So there's cables which run from here to the end of the airplane fuselage and run all the way forward to the cockpit. So if the airplane has a tendency to have its nose down a little bit or its nose high, the trim tab is is adjusted to resolve that. So, and those are changes which would be normal. They would be normal in-flight control changes that the pilot makes. So as the pilot turns the control wheel, the trim tab control up in the cockpit, it turns this, it pulls on the cables, which rotates this.
And then you can see the trim tab move.
And so the trim tab, that would be if the airplane has a tendency to nose down a little bit, you would trim the trim tab up. And if the airplane has a tendency to nose up, you would trim the trim tab down a little bit. So that way the pilot doesn't have to continuously exert, doesn't have to push or pull on the control yoke, so it makes the airplane more stable to fly and reduces a little bit of the load on the pilot for keeping the airplane at the right attitude.